Exposed: How a stranger's kindness transformed a paralyzed CEO's life in just 24 hours. Jason Carter sat in the sterile confines of his luxury home, staring at the walls that had once echoed with laughter and the rustle of stock market success. Now, they closed around him, suffocating and silent. At 43, he should have been at the pinnacle of his career, but a single car accident had stripped him of mobility and locked him away in a gilded cage, paralyzed from the waist down. The world outside thrived without him, and he felt like a ghost, drifting through the husk of his former life, trapped between memories and despair. When the doorbell rang, he initially brushed off the sound, lost in a cloud of anguish. It didn't matter who it was or why they came. The yearning isolation wrapped around him like a thick blanket. But the persistent chime pulled him back, and reluctantly, he wheeled himself towards the door to find Marcus, a down-to-earth handyman dressed in faded jeans and a simple t-shirt, wearing an easy smile that contrasted starkly with the sterile surfaces of Jason's home. "What can I help you with, Mr. Carter?" Marcus asked, surveying the room filled with remnants of Jason's once vibrant life. "Leaky sink," he replied tersely, dismissing any attempts at discussion. He felt the weight of his lost connections, the echoes of laughter from parties that once filled this space, now vacant and unsettling. As Marcus got to work, Jason's emotions churned, anger intermingled with a painful longing for the camaraderie he had taken for granted. Here was this man, sweating under the weight of his own labors, while Jason sat like an immobile king on an empty throne. Gradually, though, to his surprise, Marcus's stories began to seep under Jason's defenses. He listened about how Marcus had lost his father, not to fate, but to financial misfortune, the kind of illness that Jason's wealth could have vanquished in an instant had he cared. The tales struck Jason harder than anticipated, consequences that weren't about tech stock crashes or business failures but real-life struggles about people's livelihoods. Could it be that he, the CEO known for his cutthroat resolve, had become so detached from reality? Just as he began to flicker with an ember of introspection, the peaceful monotony of the day shattered a frantic call from his wife. Their daughter had fallen, a painful shriek echoing through the phone like a gunshot, pulling Jason into the moment with a sickening jolt. Panic clawed at his chest as he faced the fight of his life, not against market shares, but for the very well-being of his child. And the decision lay heavy in the air, a moral quandary tugging at his conscience, to ask Marcus for help, a man he had barely acknowledged that day, or to remain the stoic figurehead, risking not just his pride but his daughter's safety. The very fabric of his being tightened with fear and desperation. Could a single day of honesty and vulnerability with someone so different from him dupe the emptiness swirling in his heart? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the silence after Marcus's last quip crawled on, Jason could feel the weight of his daughter's unsafe circumstance like a noose. He was at a crossroads, where digging his heels into pride would lead to isolation, but reaching out meant peeling back layers of hurt, fragility, and uncertainty. As the tension in the room surged, he felt the walls closing in again. Would he have the courage to let Marcus in when he desperately needed someone by his side? Or would this moment slip away, leaving him once more in haunting solitude, watching life unfold without him? The stillness in the air reverberated with Jason's racing heartbeat, each thud an urgent reminder of the choice he faced. Numbers and dollar signs flashed through his mind, abstract equations that had once defined success, now feeling hollow against the visceral reality of his daughter's distress. For the first time in a long while, he thought about the fragility of human connections and the dire need for support, real support, not the kind that money could buy. "Marcus," he said, his voice barely a whisper. It felt like climbing a steep mountain, and the summit was shrouded in fog. "Can you help me?" For a fraction of a moment, both men locked eyes, disbelief flickering across Marcus's features, then transforming into a resolute understanding. He straightened his back, wiping his hands on his jeans as if steeling himself for the task ahead. "Of course, Mr. Carter. What do you need?" The words spilled out of Jason in a rush. "My daughter, she fell. I don't know how bad it is, but I have to get to her. I can't drive." The admission felt like a twisted knot unraveling in his chest, unspooling the tightly wound pride he clutched for so long. Marcus nodded, pulling his phone from his pocket. He began scanning through contacts, looking for someone who could help. "I'll call a ride right away. We can get you there." As Jason watched Marcus speak, resolve surging in his companion's voice, a sense of shame washed over him. He had often been the one handing out orders, carrying weighty expectations, and now he was here, leaning on an ordinary man he had just met. In that moment, he questioned the foundation of his identity. Who was he without his wealth or status? Could he be okay with revealing his vulnerability? Marcus ended the call and turned back to Jason. "A car's on the way. You should get ready." "Thank you," Jason managed, although it felt insufficient. He could feel the walls around him beginning to shift, as if peeling away layers of isolation with each heartbeat. As he wheeled himself toward the door, he felt the hesitation of his former self tugging at the shadows behind him. This was uncharted territory. Stepping outside required more than just getting into a car. It was the leap into embracing a new reality, one where help was not a sign of weakness but an unguarded acceptance of shared existence. Every bit of Jason's skin prickled with anticipation. What would it be like to sit passenger instead of pilot? The shifting dynamics felt both terrifying and liberating. Marcus loaded Jason's wheelchair into the trunk, a simple gesture that somehow felt monumental. As they drove, Jason found himself scanning the mundane sights of their neighborhood, once familiar but now cloaked in the strange lens of his current existence. "Your daughter," Marcus said, breaking the stillness. "She'll be all right, don't you worry. Kids are tough. Just like my boy." His nonchalance was comforting. For the first time today, Jason felt a flicker of hope ignite a distant corner of his heart. "How old is he?" 10. "Smart like a whip. Little rascal can talk the socks off of anyone." There was a warm fondness in Marcus's voice that resonated within Jason, stirring something deep inside, the longing to rediscover those simple joys captured in laughter and warmth. A new determination began taking root in Jason's heart. He realized that if he was willing to admit his reliance on Marcus for support, perhaps he could also start opening up to others in his life. His daughter, his wife, old friends, could they have been up to something together all along, waiting for him to stop pretending he was infallible? As the car sped towards the hospital, Jason knew the road ahead wasn't just about healing but about revitalizing connections he had neglected. The embrace of vulnerability was becoming clearer. What had he truly been afraid of all this time? His limitations or the connections that might help him transcend them? But as his thoughts began to solidify into a newfound vision, an unsettling question bubbled to the surface. What would happen when he finally confronted the repercussions of his past indifference? Would the people he had abandoned welcome him back, or had he lost them forever? Moments stretched between Jason and the life outside, leaving him on the cusp of realization, and he was terrified of what awaited him on the other side. The hospital loomed ahead, sterile and imposing, a stark contrast to the warmth of the car they traveled in. As they pulled into the parking lot, Jason could feel the weight of anxiety coiling in his chest once again, tightening with each passing moment. The sight of the emergency entrance sent a wave of uncertainty crashing over him. Would he still be the same man after this? Would he know how to navigate a world built on connections instead of transactions? "Wait here," Marcus instructed gently as Jason's eyes darted to the hospital's entrance. "I'll find out where to go." As Marcus climbed out, Jason's heart raced. Left alone with his thoughts, the familiar tornado of self-doubt began to swirl within him. Before, he had relied solely on statistics, margins, and strategic outcomes to direct his life. Now, the fear of confronting the emotional fallout weighed heavier than his physical limitations. What if his daughter no longer recognized the man he'd become? It felt like an eternity, but Marcus returned, waving an encouraging hand. "They're expecting you. Let us go." They entered the hospital, fluorescent lights glaring down as they navigated the sterile hallways. Jason felt stripped bare, exposed amidst the chatter of nurses, the beeping of machines, and the occasional cough of a patient. Each step felt monumental, a purposeful movement into vulnerability. "Over here," Marcus directed, guiding him toward a waiting area. Jason could see other families, some sharing the burden of fear, others finding silver linings in the bleakness. As they settled in, he contemplated the children in those families. Were similar thoughts racing through their parents' minds? What if they too wrestled with the weight of guilt, trying to reconcile their past mistakes against the present crisis? Before he could spiral too deep, a doctor approached, her expression a blend of concern and professionalism. "Mr. Carter. I'm Dr. Liu. Your daughter is stable and will be fine, but we need to discuss her injuries." The news washed over Jason like ice water. Relief initiated a cascade of emotions, but apprehension lingered beneath the surface. "What kind of injuries?" he managed to ask. The doctor explained the specifics with clarity, outlining a recovery plan that gave Jason hope intermingled with fear. She spoke with such authority that for a moment, he slipped into a mental state of business mode, analyzing the data, assessing strategies, but reality quickly pulled him back. This was about his daughter, not a merger or acquisition. As the doctor continued, Jason realized that he had to engage, not just absorb information. "What can we do to help her recover?" he asked, voice steady yet softer than he intended. The word surprised him. It was not a directive, but a question of connection born from genuine concern. Dr. Liu paused, gauging his sincerity. "Being present is just as important as any medical treatment. Kids need to feel safe and loved, especially during recovery. Your presence will matter more than you realize." Jason nodded, the weight of her words echoing the lessons he had begun to grasp. This was not just about his daughter healing physically, it was about him starting to heal emotionally. In that moment, he understood what Marcus had imparted earlier: relationships were the bedrock of support and resilience. As Jason began to mentally prepare himself for seeing his daughter, he felt a shifting within, an urge to reach out and support her rather than shield himself behind past walls. He could be there for her, seeing, validating, loving her through this moment. This was a transformation taking root, but as he took a deep breath, preparing to face the truth, a sharp jolt of anxiety pierced through him once more. What if his daughter's reaction to him was not what he hoped for? Could she forgive the emotional distance he had placed between them? It was a riddle he needed to confront, one that echoed the life lessons forged during his vulnerability with Marcus. As they made their way towards the room, he felt everything teeter on the edge. The moment had arrived, where he would confront not only his past mistakes but the elusive connections he deeply craved to heal. Would this moment redefine who they could become together? The door to the hospital room stood before Jason like a sentry, guarding his daughter's fragile state. He hesitated, hand poised inches from the handle, the tension coiling tighter in his chest. What if she looked at him with disappointment? What if the years of his emotional absence materialized into her gaze, a mirror reflecting all his failures as a father? Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, a steady presence grounding him amidst the chaos in his mind. "You've got this," he whispered, a simple phrase packed with conviction. Taking a calculated breath, Jason twisted the knob and pushed the door open. Inside, the room was bright yet clinical. The faint hum of machines stitched the silence together, and there in the bed, lay his daughter, pale and small amidst a tangle of sheets and medical equipment. Instinctively, his heart shattered. She looked so vulnerable, yet her spirit clung to life, defying the darkness that clutched at its edge. "Dad?" Ella's voice wobbled, a frail sound that beckoned him forward. He stepped into the room, each stride laden with both hopeful determination and lingering doubt. "Hey, sweetie," he managed, his voice thick with emotion, the fatherly instinct resurgent within him. Her face broke into a weak smile, fragile, but enough to ignite warmth in the cold chamber of his heart. As he approached, Jason felt the weight of his anxieties begin to crack, just enough to allow a sliver of light to seep in. The past did not vanish, nor did it erase the distance, but the act of simply being there turned the tide against the insidious thoughts spiraling in his mind. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her eyes reflecting fear and a hint of guilt. The words tumbled over him like a cloak, heavy and suffocating. "No, no, Ella," he replied, shaking his head fiercely. "You don't have to say that. I'm just glad you're here with us." This exchange jolted a realization within him. It was not simply about his daughter feeling safe but about him embracing vulnerability too. It was a foreign thought but began to unfurl like a wildflower in the cracks of concrete. As he sat by her bedside, Jason noticed how the hours seemed to evaporate as they spoke in soft tones. He learned to navigate the landscape of her fears, what the hospital meant to her, the strange comfort of familiar nurses and the sterile smell surrounding her. Ella confessed how scared she felt, amidst the montages of her fondest memories playing through her mind. "Do you remember our camping trip last summer?" Jason asked, determined to weave their shared past into the present. The question lingered in the air like an unturned page. A flicker of recognition danced in her eyes. "The one with the fireflies?" "Yes. You caught that giant one in your jar." He laughed, emboldened by the recollection. The warmth of nostalgia enveloped them like a fort against present fears. As their conversation unfolded, Jason felt pieces of himself he thought were lost begin to drift back. He was no longer just a businessman confined by metrics and data, he was her father, tasked with rebuilding the emotional bridge between them one brick at a time. But mingled with his revival of purpose came the stakes of his role. With every heartbeat, he recognized the challenge: could he remain resilient against the looming specter of failure that had haunted him for so long? Would he rise to embrace this newfound connection, or would he retreat back to the safety of detachment? Just when the sweetness of their reconnection flourished amid shared laughter, a nurse entered with a clipped expression. "I'm afraid it's time for her medication," she announced, a stark reminder that life continued to drum forward. Jason's heart fell. He realized just how fragile this moment was, a mere thread in the vast tapestry of their relationship, yet, at the same time, it had grown stronger. "Can you stay for the whole time?" Ella's voice cracked, tipping him into uncertainty once more. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving her, but as he looked at her, this bright, brave girl who had withstood so much, he felt a flicker of hope emerge. "I promise, I will be right here, every step of the way," he affirmed, grabbing her hand firmly. As the nurse adjusted the fore, Jason battled the swelling tide of uncertainty. This was just the beginning. With every challenge ahead, something new would emerge, potentiality wrapped in the uncertainty of their future. The moment had come to embrace a confrontation that had lingered far too long. Determined, Jason resolved that he would not only face it but thrive in building a connection that had once seemed insurmountable. Yet as they waited for the medication to take effect, a sharp beep from the monitor reverberated through the room, drawing his eyes sharply toward the machine. His heart raced anew as he sensed trouble brewing. What would it take to keep them both anchored amidst this storm? The rhythmic beeping of the monitor formed a metronome to Jason's escalating anxiety. Each sound felt like a countdown, congealing with the urgency of the moment. His grip tightened around Ella's hand, as if he could anchor her to reality just by sheer willpower. But what if hope crumbled beneath the pressure of unwarranted expectations? What if, in his determination to be the father she needed, he unwittingly set himself up for failure once again? The nurse's attention darted to the monitor, a furrow appearing on her brow. Jason's breathing quickened, and with it, a familiar panic gnawed at the edges of his composure. He had been accustomed to controlling every facet of his business life, but this was entirely outside his domain, an unpredictable tempest that vague projections and strategies could not tame. The sense of helplessness clawed at him, a stark reminder of how far he had stepped away from true engagement. Money, titles, and success had lured him into a maelstrom of detachment. "Jason, look at me," the nurse's tone sliced through his turbulence. "We need to keep her steady. Let us focus on Ella. You need to be strong for her right now." That directive, simple yet profound, struck a chord within him. Be strong, he thought, yet strength had evaded him in the past. He felt like a ghost in his own life, skimming along the surface without ever diving deep. As the nurse worked, Jason tuned into Ella's gaze, the vulnerability reflecting back at him a vital understanding. She was battling fears that mirrored his own. I can't let her down, he reminded himself, feeling the intensity of that promise surge through him. Sinking into a cathartic resolve, Jason resolved to provide the emotional support she needed while forging his own transformation. Ella, he said, leaning closer to her, you're brave, and I want to learn from your strength. We're in this together. Her eyes widened as if recognizing the enormity of their shared journey. He felt an invisible tether tighten between them, a bond fraught with unspoken agreements, a commitment to be present, even within the chaos. Moments later, a medical team flooded the room, intent on stabilizing Ella. People moved in fluid motions, guided by a symbiotic blend of urgency and purpose. Jason felt his original uncertainty swell again but fought it down. This is where it starts, he muttered under his breath. I won't let fear dictate my actions anymore. I need to manage this storm. Instead of retreating into seclusion, he embraced the discomfort, studying the professionals with a focus akin to dissecting a business case. He absorbed the medical jargon, the measured exchanges, and the calm energy that they exuded, vowing to mirror it in his own response. Resilience, he realized, wasn't solely about fearlessness. It was the courage to engage in moments that felt terrifying. Can I help? He surprised himself by voicing the question. The nurse turned, bemusement flickering in her eyes, as if gauging his intent. But before he could flinch under her scrutiny, she nodded, one firm step welcomed into the team. Hold her hand. Speak to her. Keep her breathing steady, was the quick guidance, and Jason birthed a newfound sense of purpose from it. In that whirlwind, he discovered not just the depths of his paternal instincts, but the latent capability to adapt, react, and ultimately grow. Ella, I'm right here, he said, locking eyes with her again, and for the first time, he felt a potent mix of determination blossom in his chest. As they worked together, he could almost feel Ella's resolve fortifying his own. He wasn't simply a spectator anymore, trapped between two contrasting lives, one of detachment, another inflected with desire to connect. He was becoming the father his daughter needed, but still, the suspense of the moment pulsed beneath the surface. What if his efforts failed? What if this experience did not transform either of them in the way they desperately hoped? As everything settled into a fragile rhythm, he couldn't help but wonder what further challenges awaited them. The crackling energy in the room hinted at an impending storm, testing their resolve. The journey was far from over, and where would it lead them next? He sensed a stirring in the air, a portent of the deeper struggles alive beneath the surface. What awaited them on this winding path of rediscovery? Jason's resolve crystallized as the minutes trickled by. The medical team swirled like a storm-turned cycle of focused efficiency, their movements choreographed through unyielding professionalism. And amidst that chaos, he couldn't help but analyze the environment not just as a father, but as a businessman. Team dynamics, operational efficiency. He recognized the parallels he had previously overlooked. Here, lives depended on collaboration, trust, and the relentless commitment to a single outcome, healing Ella. Engagement, he thought, the word surfacing as he watched the nurse expertly managing the equipment. His past was riddled with meetings and high-stakes negotiations, where he meticulously mapped strategies with stubborn adherence to control. But what he was learning here was something far different. This endeavor required surrender not to chaos, but to shared purpose. Your help is vital. Keep talking to her, the nurse encouraged. The urgency in her tone forced Jason to connect even deeper with Ella. His admiration for her spirit surged. They're in it together, he mused, recognizing the importance of bonding amidst adversity, just as the staff was doing. Ella, you're strong, he whispered, feeling her tiny fingers grip his tightly. We have a whole lifetime of adventures waiting for us. I need you to hang on. As moments of clarity broke through, Jason felt an unfamiliar emotion swell, hope burgeoning alongside his fear. He had situated the greater part of his identity in accomplishing tasks and cultivating a facade of control. All this time, He had underestimated the strength that lay in vulnerability, the genuine emotional connection that rooted itself not in accomplishments but in shared hardship, but with that clarity came an unsettling question. What would this transformation require from him? He hadn't prepared for this depth of emotional engagement. The specter of his past loomed large, whispering doubts, reminding him of every failure he had masked with bravado. I can't go back to the old me, he resolved, struggling as he contemplated the possibility of past behaviors creeping back into the new rhythm they were forging. The duality of his existence pressed down upon him, the business executive who prized efficiency at all costs versus the father yearning to truly connect, who understood that the path to love often ran through the darkest valleys that and the charged silence. Jason's heartbeat drummed a resonant counterpoint to the sterile beeping of the monitor. He scrutinized the faces that surrounded Ella, new aides, nurses, and doctors. Each exuded confidence, but he recognized the fatigue that shimmered just beneath the surface. As much as this experience demanded of him, he could sense the collective weight upon the medical team, too. Their commitment was equally daunting. Every decision could tip the scales of life and death. What can I learn from them? The realization punctured through his self-doubt. Among the responsibilities of a father, he could channel that team dynamic into his own journey of growth. He leaned a little closer to Ella, his fingers brushing through her hair, inhaling her scent and imprinting it firmly in his memory. It grounded him, and more importantly, it inspired him to dig deeper into this emotional terrain. Ella, I promise I will become a better father, he declared quietly, the pledge solidifying between them like a vow. The uncertainty of their future loomed, yet adrenaline-fueled clarity surged within. It was time to shed old skins. He would have to face those very fears that had tethered him, the obstacles that had bred disconnect, and carve a path toward understanding that in that moment, a flicker of resolve ignited. The uncharted territory of vulnerability did not signify weakness, but a potential realm for growth. Yet, the stakes were high. How to maintain this newfound honesty without spiraling into self-doubt again? The complexities of fatherhood unfurled limits he hadn't been prepared for. Suddenly, the beeping of the monitor grew sporadic, punctuating the air with chaotic insistence. Every head turned, and the room thickened with sudden tension. Jason met the gaze of the nurse, who swiftly orchestrated the response team, the unspoken language of urgency filling the space. He felt a fresh wave of anxiety crest over him, juxtaposed against the strength he had just unearthed. What awaited them now? This moment burrowed beneath the skin, a harbinger of a challenge that might shape his journey into fatherhood. The storm was upon them, the beacon of change loomed large, but was he ready to weather what lay ahead? Jason's heart raced as the cacophony of alarms escalated, transforming the room into a battlefield of urgency. It was a stark reminder of how thin the thread of life could be. The medical team launched into action, instinctively falling into their roles as they countered the destabilizing rhythms of the monitor. Jason moved back slightly, granting space but unwilling to detach. Each frantic moment tested the resolve he had just begun to forge. He clenched his fists, grounding himself. This crisis, he realized, was not merely about Ella but also about confronting the man he had been, a man defined by compulsion and control who now stood in the midst of an unraveling reality. The lead physician, a woman with piercing blue eyes, initiated a series of commands that flowed seamlessly through the team. They communicated with cool efficiency but faced the storm brewing inside Jason with unspoken empathy. He could feel their commitment wrap around him, solidifying the understanding that, as they fought to stabilize Ella, he too was being called to a deeper engagement. Again, he was struck by the irony. His past life had centered around negotiating deals, managing crises on the basis of strategic calculations. Yet here, amidst this fray, calculations meant nothing without trust, connection, and emotional investment. He pondered if he might seize this moment to incorporate that understanding into his role, not just as a father, but as a leader within his own life. As the lead physician barked essential directives, Jason caught sight of a nurse quietly crouched next to another child in the room, who had fallen silent, her small figure curving into itself. With gentle words, she coaxed him back, talking about his favorite toys, about superheroes and adventure. In that instance, Jason felt the ripple of realization wash over him, a profundity born of compassion. What if vulnerability became my anchor? He wondered. The nurse's instinct to connect with a frightened child opened a new portal in his mind. He could replicate that warmth, allowing his fatherhood to guide him toward genuine interactions, even in trying times. The chaos sliced open fresh vulnerabilities as Ella's monitor stabilized. Her struggles were not just reflections of illness but were mirrored in the emotions spilling from Jason himself. He had shielded his heart for so long, maintaining distance as a misguided definition of strength. If he was to embrace this newfound honesty with Ella, and himself, the walls had to come down. "Stay with me, Ella," he whispered, fighting back the swelling tide of fear. He cast a glance at the nurse who had encouraged him earlier. "How did you know to engage her?" he asked as their eyes met. "It's instinct," she replied softly, her demeanor signaling a safe space. Children need to feel they are heard and loved, especially in the scariest moments. He felt an echo of realization. A path forward had begun to take shape. It mirrored the lessons he had encouraged in the boardroom, framed by data and outcomes, yet he was beginning to see the fractals of deeper truths emerge. Vulnerability, engagement, and trust were not merely methods to success, they were bedrocks of authentic relationships. As the team stabilized Ella, a sense of shared resolve threaded them together. Collective heartbeats became a digital pulse that tethered even the once distant businessmen to the raw immediacy of fatherhood. But with this growing awareness arose an unsettling weight. Was this momentary clarity enough to transform him permanently? Then, abruptly, the lead physician turned toward him. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask for your help." The gravity in her tone compelled Jason to lean into the challenge. He could feel the stakes were about to rise. "What do you need?" he questioned, his heart thudding. In a place where fear once dictated his actions, he sensed the shift of burgeoning power in knowing that he could contribute, right alongside the medical team. "Your daughter needs a strengthened focus, and I need you to communicate with her," the physician replied. "She needs to hear what matters, but you must choose your words carefully." This request hung heavily in the air, laden with the gravity of their situation. It was a moment teetering on the brink of vulnerability and profound potential. As Jason contemplated how to articulate hope amid a tempest of dread, he recognized a crossroads, one where he could either falter into his old patterns of control or lean into this fierce necessity for connection. Would he rise to the occasion? The time had come to face not just the external storm but the internal battles that shaped him. He took a deep breath, readying himself to articulate the truth of his love for Ella, hoping that these newfound revelations would wield power he had never tapped before. What if his words could shift the landscape of both their lives? Would he finally unearth the courage to face that challenge head-on? The harsh lights above flickered as Jason's gaze landed on Ella, her small figure wrapped in a sea of machines. The rhythmic beeping, now a monotonous backdrop, dulled his senses just enough for doubt to seep in. What could he possibly say to reach her across this void? He felt the urgency of the physician's request pressing against his chest, constricting his breath. Jason had spent years navigating boardrooms with calculated precision, but now he found himself wrestling with nameless fears and a desperate need to connect. How would he ensure his words mattered? "Stay with me, Ella," he murmured again, and with those 3 words, he began to form the foundation of his message, a message forged from vulnerability and raw honesty. A tremor of uncertainty pulsed through him, the idea scared him. In the past, his attempts to be transparent had often met with ridicule or dismissal. But this was different. This was his daughter's fragile life at stake. Clarity pierced through his confusion as he turned his thoughts inward. What did he truly wish for Ella to hear? His hands trembled as they hovered above her little body, a gesture of support and love. He wanted her to feel each heartbeat, to know that even in the darkest of moments, she was not alone. "Ella, I want you to be brave," he began, his voice wavering between strength and fragility. "You're not just my daughter, you're my heart. I know things feel scary right now, but I believe in you. You have so much fight in you." Each sentence flowed with increasingly palpable intention. He could see flickers of awareness in her eyes, a flickering response that spurred him on. "Remember those summer afternoons we spent painting the skies? You told me that every little thread in the colors mattered. Well, just like those colors, every part of you matters, to your laughter, your strength, your incredible spirit. Focus on that and hold on to it. As the words left his lips, Jason felt a weight lift. The floodgates of deepest fears opened, transforming into a swell of hopeful possibilities. Ella was more than a child facing a health crisis, she was his greatest partner in this journey of growth. Each moment that passed solidified in him a new understanding. Parenting didn't just involve the big gestures. It thrived in the subtleties, the honest exchanges during the storm. And the ensuing silence. He noticed her slow breaths, a gradual easing in heart rates echoed around the room, and hope flickered like a distant ember. He locked eyes with the physician, who nodded knowingly. Jason could sense the shift in energy. He had tapped into the deep reservoir of love meant to sustain them both. The greater battle loomed behind him, not just against the illness but against the old version of himself, the controlled businessman he had worn like a suit of armor. But in this raw moment, he felt cracks begin to form in that armor. Questions about the future pressed upon him. Would he truly step beyond his comfort zone? Could he redefine his role as a father in a world of vulnerability instead of control? "I won't let you down," he vowed quietly, internalizing it as he squeezed Ella's tiny hand. "Together, we'll fight this." But amidst this surge of newfound courage, uncertainty loomed large. What awaited him when the initial wave of hope settled? How would he fulfill his promise to Ella while also confronting his fears of inadequacy? As he cast another glance at the medical team, he knew that they had built a fragile but unyielding bridge over the precipice of despair. Yet as stillness blanketed the room, a question weighed heavily on his heart. Would he have the strength to maintain this openness beyond these walls, or would the old Jason, the one clinging tightly to control, threaten to re-emerge? For the rest of this night, Jason would stand guard over that possibility, but as he looked to the future, another reckoning awaited. Could he courageously embrace the openness not only for Ella but also for himself? At the edge of resolution, Jason was about to discover the true measure of vulnerability and whether it was indeed his greatest strength. In the eerie stillness of the room, Jason remained at Ella's bedside, caught between hope and the unknown. The words he had spoken hung in the air, a tangible promise that he could feel swirl around them. He clutched her hand tightly, but doubts crept in like shadows threatening to engulf the light he'd just ignited. What if this moment was not enough? What lay ahead when the flicker of hope began to dim? He leaned closer, his thoughts now more defined. Over the years, he had mastered the art of leadership, had pulled together fractured businesses, and had secured countless deals with a formulaic approach rooted in data and metrics. Yet, he realized, he had neglected the one domain that truly mattered: his relationship with Ella, a fragile canvas that was not meant to be handled with the same clinical precision he employed in business. The echoes of his previous life betrayed him. How many times had he prioritized success over connection? How many conversations had devolved into negotiations, where metrics overshadowed meaning? In reconnaissance of his own heart, he felt his previous self shatter, and in its place, the urgent need to transform bloomed. He took in the sterile environment, the whirring machines and blinking lights. It wasn't just Ella who needed to fight. Jason could gather strength from her spirit. If she could battle through this, he could forge a new path that embraced vulnerability and intimacy. It was more than a shift in tactics, it was a metamorphosis in the very essence of who he was to become. The thought emerged: the need to also connect with himself. His pulse quickened. He had spent so much time detached, processing emotions through a business-like lens. This was the moment to redefine his existence as a father. Perhaps he could break down the barriers he had built over time. A true connection demanded authenticity, not bravado. But could he be brave enough to dismantle the very identity that had served him so well in the world of business? In a sudden surge of resolve, Jason stood. Each step away from Ella's bed felt monumental, every inch he moved was a test of his will. He took a deep breath, leaning against the wall, eyes closed and head bowed. The sterile smell stung his nostrils, yet it became a stark reminder of the very realness of his situation. Inside, a storm brewed as he faced a confrontation with himself. How had he let ambition cloud the most sacred bond? If he was to emerge from this challenge not as the old Jason but as a father forged from connection and acceptance, he had to confront not only his fears but also the limiting beliefs that kept him shackled. Just then, the doctor entered, breaking his reverie. She reported that Ella's vitals were stabilizing, an encouraging sign, but it arrived like a whisper in the cacophony of Jason's thoughts. He could feel the weight of her professional demeanor, but in it, he sensed an opportunity. "What do I need to know?" Jason asked, conviction lacing his voice. The doctor offered insights that dug deeper than facts. Empathy flooded through her words, and with each syllable, Jason found potential answers for his own growing uncertainties. They weren't just practicing medicine, they were igniting hope within the fragile world surrounding Ella. When their conversation concluded, Jason exited the hospital room, not only to ponder the advice shared but also to explore a nascent idea. Perhaps he could prepare a way to nurture Ella love in action. This time, it wouldn't be about the grand gestures but rather the emotional cadence, the moments he missed in silence. The simple, unwavering acts of love forged in shared experiences. The gravity of his path weighed heavily as he stepped back to Ella's side, his heart thundering with a new purpose. He'd begin to document their journey together, crafting notes filled with memories, reflections, and encouragement, his own mosaic of love to complement her recovery and remind them both of the intricate threads of their relationship. And as he opened a small notebook he found lying on a scratchy hospital chair, the first line struck him square in the chest, "Dear Ella." As the ink flowed, his thoughts poured out, revealing depths he feared to explore. What would that journey look like? Would he have the courage to share these notes not only with her but to the outside world once she recovered? Would this act redefine their connection forever? And as he wrote, doubts lingered. How would their lives change in the light of newfound vulnerability and expression? With each stroke of the pen, he was forging a new beginning, one that tested the very essence of his commitment to growth. But with each word, the question also echoed, could opening the floodgates of his heart heal not just Ella, but also himself? As the sun peeked through the blinds of the hospital room, Jason felt a strong sense of clarity wash over him. He was no longer merely the CEO of a successful company. Instead, he had embraced an entirely different role of father, embarking on a profound journey of connection and transparency with his daughter, Ella. The depth of their shared experience during this crisis had rewritten his understanding of love and responsibility. It was a new dawn, and Jason was finally ready to step out from the shadows of his previous self. That he could still vividly recall the cold detachment he had shielded himself with, the way he prioritized metrics over meaningful exchanges, both at work and at home. But sitting by Ella's bedside, he recognized that real success transcended valuations and stock prices. It thrived in authentic relationships. This evolution was not just for Ella's sake but for his own self-discovery. He felt the raw emotions bubbling up to the surface, and as comforting as it was terrifying, he was prepared to navigate them. Ella stirred, her eyes fluttering open to meet his warm gaze. Her presence grounded him further, reminding him that every ounce of vulnerability he had shed was a step toward healing for both of them. "Dad?" she murmured, voice still raspy but threaded with a hopeful fragility. "I'm right here, Ella," Jason replied, the sincerity in his voice resonating with a newfound strength. "And I promise, every day from now on, I will be here for you, attentive and present." It was an affirmation, a commitment he was prepared to honor. Reflecting on the conversations and bonds he wanted to build, he reached into his bag, where he had stored the notebook filled with thoughts he had begun the night before. "I started something for you, kid." Jason opened to the first page, where he had documented their shared memories, lessons learned, and aspirations fulfilled. "I want you to know how much you mean to me and how incredibly strong you are. This journey is ours, and I intend to embrace it fully." As the words flowed from his mouth, he observed how they pierced through the remnants of doubt and anxiety, creating a tapestry of love mapped across the hospital room. This wasn't merely his story, it was Ella's, too. He began narrating their adventures, fishing trips, stargazing nights, the laughter of summer barbecues, and with each recounted tale, the connection between them grew stronger. As he spoke, he could see Ella's spirit lifting. Her eyes sparkled with recognition, as if each mention of their past ignited flickers of hope for the future. "Can we go camping again, Dad?" she asked, her voice gaining strength. The question didn't feel like the longing for a casual trip, it was an affirmation of the life they could reclaim together. "Yes, I promise we will, and we will make every moment count," he answered firmly. The weight of his prior anxieties began to dissipate in that very commitment. He recognized that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was, in fact, an invitation to forge deeper connections. The days transformed into a rhythm defined by candid conversations. Jason took every opportunity to reminisce with Ella while encouraging her to validate her feelings and experiences. They would share hopes for her recovery and dreams for the days ahead. On the surface, it appeared as if the hospital was merely a backdrop for healing, but beneath it lay a rich terrain of connection ready to take root. Soon, Ella could leave her hospital bed, and as they rolled outside for the first time, Jason's heart soared. The blue sky stretched above them, a magnificent canvas of freedom waiting to be explored. "Can we go to the park?" she asked suddenly, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "Of course, we can even build a treehouse together," Jason replied, realizing the impact of that unguarded promise. Each activity became more than a to-do, it morphed into a shared endeavor of growth, a tangible renewal of their relationship. Upon returning home, Jason felt that openness wouldn't just become a fleeting phase marked by Ella's recovery, it would shape his ongoing existence. The world outside, once a place of indifference, now seemed riddled with possibilities. He could re-establish connections with family and friends, freely admitting his vulnerabilities, dismantling the fortress of isolation he had constructed over the years. Weeks turned into months, and as he stood on the porch, watching Ella laugh and play with their new neighbors, he felt a budding confidence take root. He anchored himself in presence, allowing hope to flourish. This, he realized, was the life he had longed for, a life that recognized the beauty in connection. That in this transformative journey, Jason emerged not just as a father, but as a man who had conquered his past, a beacon of resilience and emotional authenticity. He understood that success was measured not in bank accounts but in moments of shared joy, laughter, and vulnerability. The challenges they had faced, while daunting, had interwoven their lives with the threads of genuine connection that he took a moment to breathe it in. Satisfaction washed over him as he finally felt whole. Jason had navigated the uncharted waters of vulnerability and surfaced victorious, not only reclaiming who he was but redefining it as someone doing more than merely existing. As life thrived before him, Jason declared silently, "This is just the beginning." Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every engagement truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this transformative ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.